not everything is knowable to everyone. It really does matter who looks and who sees and where you look from. My name is Nolan Oswald Dennis. I'm an artist based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I have a background in architecture, an interest in science and technology, and a constant concern for and obsession with transformation of the world, like the necessity for the world to change in order to accommodate me and people like me. I guess coming from South Africa, you can't avoid the complexity of South African history, and all of those politics, kind of anti-colonial struggle. I feel like my practice emerged from like thinking about all of these things at the same time. I've always been interested in like the poetic dimension of technical language, so things like diagrams and models. And I think my work is trying to hold these two ways of thinking about the world, like a cosmological perspective and a kind of techno-scientific perspective, as somehow equivalent. And when you hold these two things together, it reveals, at least to me, a certain attempt to control knowledge. My work in general is trying to think seriously about the different things that we invoke when we think about the land, when we talk about the land, when we imagine the landscape, which resonates differently according to who's talking about it. In South Africa, like in many formerly colonized places, the land is a kind of archive of violence. And that site in the film is one of the most resonant sites for me to think about this complication, how the world itself, the planet, the ground, isn't just a kind of neutral site where history happens, but is entangled in that history, is an active participant and witness to that history. The question for me is, what does it mean to collaborate with the land? What does it mean to even look at the land? And so in the film, the landscape is always inverted, which is another kind of reversal. And I think that's like the gesture that I'm always thinking about, how to unsee the world in order to like really create a relationship with it. Reverse archaeology is kind of like a critique of the history of archaeology in South Africa, which is similar to the history of archaeology everywhere. It starts with grave robbing and desecration of sacred sites, and then turns into like preservation. For me, reverse archaeology is a way to think of how to deal with that history of violence. That's such a big part of how memory is constructed, through archaeology, through the landscape, and in deep time. So this work, this untitled wall work, is a kind of concrete poem that's built from fragments taken from different writers from all around the world who use this term, this specific construction, the land as this kind of honorific title for something that's beyond just what we see. And so it's a collection of fragments of texts that are constructed in a way in this diagram that requires the people who encounter the work to kind of knit the meaning together, to kind of weave parts of it together and try and make sense of it. I think there are like 1,000 ways to read it. You can read it this way, you can read it that way, you can read it this way. And somehow in all of that, there's a possibility of like constructing a new collective meaning. I spoke to a Black South African geologist who told me that for her, geology is like beyond decolonization, because it's not possible to colonize the land itself. The land is somehow beyond colonization. I thought this was kind of like radical, and I've been trying to think about what this means. The other question I asked was, if you had all the resources in the world what would you do? And she said, I would digitize my collection of rocks. And I thought this was also quite radical because a digital rock is like exactly not a rock. Like a rock is a rock, and this is something else. It's some kind of shadow of a rock. It's like a ghost of a rock. And that's what inspired this work called Isivivane, which is a work that is just reproducing a collection of rocks which are both a rock in some sense, but also in very real terms, not a rock. And this is a kind of meditation for me on trying to think about what we really mean when we talk about the land, when we talk about the planet, when we talk about this material. What is the thing that we're not able to grasp?